Today we're talking about the second season of Lyoko, so if you missed my first couple videos, check them out in the description below. But honestly, this show's set up so you can really jump in anywhere, which is great, cause this season is one of the biggest glow-ups of any show I can think of. Like in my last video on Shaolin Chronicles, there was several comments wondering how CGI from a show 10 years earlier looked better, but looking at season 2, it's even more amazing. We got a lot of episodes to cover today, so let's just jump into episode 27. Right away we see the warriors have brand new vehicles, which is pretty cool, as we see Odd nearly flatten himself on a rock riding his new hoverboard. It's got little cat whiskers on the top deck, which is fun, but Ulrich has this goofy wheel, and despite a one-wheeled motorcycle sounding cool in concept, it just looks so goofy to me, I don't know. Not only do we have new toys, but new enemies too, and I love this design. It's like a metal laser spider. It's pretty cool how it positions and stabilizes itself, even if it looks a little more like it's doing a pose out of Charlie's Angels. Jeremy's developed a new security program that'll alert everyone when XANA takes over a tower, so Aelita's free to go to school and be a regular kid, which is nice to see. You really feel happy for her. Aelita picks the last name Stones for some reason, and says she's Canadian, even though Odd says she was his Dutch cousin. Later Yumi says she's Japanese, and I guess Aelita sounds more Japanese than anything, but I actually like this name more than her original name Maya, which we'll see in the prequel episode later. At school, Ulrich is working up the courage to talk to Yumi, but she's interrupted by a new character, William, who seems to be this bad boy who got kicked out of his last school and is working with Yumi on a school field trip, adding yet another layer of tension and hesitance for Ulrich. Jeremy and Aelita go out to the forest, but when Jeremy runs back for his laptop, Aelita's attacked by a group of wolves who give her traumatic flashbacks. She runs through the forest until she sees an abandoned house, where she gets yet another flashback of a professor playing a piano here. The whole house is possessed by XANA, who throws all kinds of glass and utensils, eventually locking Ulrich and Yumi in the furnace. So the only way to save them is to go to Lyoko, and fortunately, instead of running back to school, Aelita has another flashback. There's a shortcut in this house. So there's some really strange coincidences, and Aelita has some connections to this mysterious abandoned house, but we don't have time to think about that because her friends are literally melting. The 3D in Lyoko is so much more expressive and better quality. Like, some of the emotions they make are a little silly, but yeah, it looks really good. Also, it wasn't until the end of season 1 I found out Odd has a symbol on his chest of Kiwi peeing, but it's a lot more clear here, which is cool, I guess, if you wanted to see that. Aelita and Odd team up to take out these big spider monsters. Aelita gets to the tower, and they go back to the past. It's a decent first episode and sets up some really good mysteries of this season, like with this hermitage house and Aelita's flashbacks, and it's so awesome to see these huge step-ups with the CGI especially. So let's see how this plays out. This episode starts with Sissy taking the whole girls' bathroom for herself, because of course she does, and when she finally leaves, she tells Aelita to go to the other bathroom to shower, so right away we see Aelita is getting in trouble and struggling to adapt to her regular human life. Later in the cafeteria, we see Aelita get yelled at for not moving fast enough in line, and I feel so bad for her. Let her look at these cute little desserts, it's her first day here. Feeling overwhelmed and getting yelled at, Aelita runs out, returning to her familiar home of Lyoko, and do you realize how sad it is? This girl would rather sit in a barren landscape where everything wants to kill her, because her other option is a lunchroom full of little shits. Meanwhile, the rest of the Lyoko gang goes into the school archives to find information on an old professor named Franz Hopper, who they had a lead on from the mysterious house last episode, referred to as the Hermitage. Later, everyone gets scanned into Lyoko to find Aelita, and we see how much stronger the warriors have gotten. Like, they just effortlessly cut the legs off this crag to topple it, with Yumi's fan dealing the final blow. Yumi has 2 fans this season instead of 1, which some anime fans would call character development or something. While Aelita's running away from the blocks, we see this little white sphere absorb her and bring her to this new futuristic location they refer to as Sector 5. Jeremy refers to the books he got from the Hermitage and begins typing in a bunch of random passwords, these digital hits that refer to the Punic Wars, a real war that happened from 264 to 164 BC between the Roman Republic Republic and the Carthaginians. Maybe there's some elaborate symbolism behind this, like this mysterious Franz Hopper was destroyed in a way similar to the Punic Empire, or maybe it's just a random tie-in. So if any history buff has any further insight on this, I'd love to know your thoughts or theories. We meet this new enemy called a Scyphozoa, this jellyfish-like creature we'll see all throughout this season, whose main goal is to drain Aelita's memory. The Scyphozoa shares its name with this species referred to as true jellyfishes, but for whatever reason, this always just looks like a gumball machine to me. Like, I could imagine an episode of Regular Show where Benson gets turned into one of these.
And I'll be all like, get back to work!
So they save Aelita and get back to the real world, where they comfort Aelita, telling her they'll make sure to have her back more so she feels safe and welcome here in the real world. We even see she gets revenge on Sissy, who comes in to yell at the gang cause Kiwi did his business in the shower.
Well, you know, Ulrich dear, a beautiful flower like me needs to be watered often.
You?
Yes, you never know. You might just sprout a brain.
Episode 29 starts with the crew debating going back to Sector 5, despite the dangers and unknown elements, and the Scyphozoa, but Aelita asserts that she wants to fight alongside everyone else. When Yumi goes home that night, her parents are pretty concerned, asking Yumi why she lies about where she's going and why she comes home late, so her parents decide to watch her more strictly and don't allow her to go out the next night, while the others go back to Sector 5. Things go pretty sour in Lyoko, but we see Yumi's at home enjoying a rare nice moment with her family, like playing Go with her dad, which is nice to see, given Yumi's home life has a lot of struggles. Yumi says she's going to bed, but actually sneaks out to Lyoko to save Aelita, since Odd and Ulrich are stuck in a limbo between virtualization and devirtualization. The sense of scale and stakes here are great, with Yumi narrowly saving Aelita, riding this elevator to this new computer, where Aelita discovers this interface must be where XANA lives. There's tons of new valuable information here about this artificial intelligence, eventually leading Aelita back to a tower, saving the others and the day. But they're not out of the woods just yet, cause Yumi's parents, along with Jim, Sissy, and the principal, arrive at the lab to find their missing daughter. I love that Sissy's able to track them down by just going into Odd's room and telling Kiwi to go find them, cause how does Kiwi sleep in here? This looks so claustrophobic. Can he even breathe in there? I will admit it does look kinda comfy though. In episode 30, the Lyoko crew makes further developments with Sector 5, fighting these flying manta rays, and Odd speculates these chunks of data must be female because of their tempers, and when Yumi says, hey, that's not cool, Jeremy just says it's her fault because Yumi's responsible for choosing her friends. You know, I'm glad Aelita's more involved this season, cause poor Yumi, with friends like this, who needs enemies? Not to mention how tunnel vision XANA is on Yumi, like, in addition to being a terrorist, XANA also might just be sexist. This actually ties in well to Yumi's conscience and family issues, cause she gets in trouble for staying out late, and she knows she'd be in a lot more trouble if her parents found out it was because she was hanging out with these boys. While she'd rather be honest with her family, it'll have to wait until they save Aelita and defeat XANA. Sissy records a conversation between Jeremy and Aelita where she laments that she still doesn't feel real and isn't Odd's cousin. So Sissy blackmails the crew to let her in on everything going on, and to let her be a part of the crew where she'll tell her father about it all, which I find really interesting because Sissy overlaps with the Lyoko crew in so many ways, and despite being a thorn in their sides a lot of the time, she's one of my favorite characters. Ulrich tries to appease Sissy by teaching her Penchak Silat, a group of martial arts from Southeast Asia I've never heard of before. I wouldn't assume there's any extra significance to them learning Silat specifically, but I'd love to know if any of y'all have ever learned this or anything about it. Sissy eventually storms off when no one spills the beans about what's really going on, but before Sissy can do anything, the wave of light washes over everything and they all return to the past. This episode plays out kinda like Groundhog's Day, where they keep reliving the same day over and over with subtle changes, like Odd getting the questions right in science class, and Ulrich now telling Sissy that Jeremy and Aelita have lost their minds and think they're part of some computer program, which is a pretty genius way to get her to not blackmail them anymore. One thing we're gonna see a lot throughout the season is XANA possessing random people throughout this school. all. Like here it possesses Sissy, which we learn is in part because Xana's powered up from all these returns to the past, but they eventually go to Lyoko and deactivate the tower as Ulrich fends off the possessed Sissy, and the episode ends with the crew learning they'll need to be much more careful now that we know Xana can possess other people, and returning to the past makes it stronger. Episode 31 starts with Aelita having a nightmare about a small forest creature getting chased by a wolf, and this nightmare even has her hallucinating she's being chased by wolves in the real world. The gang decides to go back to the Hermitage to see if they can learn more about these hallucinations, and they find a small plush doll named Mr. Puck. I've actually read Mr. Puck is a big influence on Aelita's Lyoko design, which is pretty cool to see, because she does have the pointy ears, and her outfit I guess kind of resembles it too. When Sissy harasses them for having a doll, a key pops out, which belongs to a train station locker. Here they find discs belonging to the mysterious Franz Hopper, but before they can find substantial information, the next day, Odd and Ulrich get possessed by some Xana shadow figure that crawls out of their lamp. Also, I really like this shot of front-facing Kiwi barking. It's just really funny to me. Kiwi looks really tiny in a lot of the shots this season, and he's really grown on me, you know? Protect him at all costs. So Xana fails to possess Odd and Ulrich, and you know, this show is French, because they can get away with saying stuff like this.
It must have something to do with sex appeal.
Yeah, right, I'm sure of that.
Jeremy eventually gets possessed, however, and the gang has to stop him, but he's really strong now and has electric powers. Like, he damn near kills Odd here. The tone shift with these transitions is so funny sometimes. The episode has a big fight with Yumi and Ulrich protecting Aelita from the block creatures, and while I'm not a big fan of combat and fights in shows, I really commend this episode, and really most of Code Lyoko, for making these fight scenes engaging and fun to watch. The possessed Jeremy devirtualizes Yumi, leaving Ulrich alone to save Aelita from this giant gumball machine with tentacles, but Odd's able to stall Jeremy just long enough for Aelita to deactivate the tower. Thank goodness Jeremy wears glasses, cause Odd tries to poke his eyes out like the Three Stooges or something, and may have just permanently blinded his friend here, if not. Xana may also give the possessed humans a stronger health system though, cause like in a future episode we see Odd just straight up zaps a possessed nurse with a defibrillator. The group speculates why Jeremy could get possessed by Xana when the others couldn't, and come to the conclusion the others must have built an immunity from their exposure in Lyoko. They decide to throw Jeremy into Lyoko to build up his immunity, but we unfortunately never get to see what he looks like in 3D, which is really disappointing, especially since the guys said Jeremy looks ridiculous here. From the Chronicles novels, we can assume his design looks like Peter Pan, like this image by DeviantArt user Nelpsia. But the funniest part of this is Jeremy hates going to Lyoko so much, he says he'd rather get possessed by Xana, which is crazy. Episode 32 has Aelita receiving a package with a mysterious necklace from a Xana delivery man, and while that's a lot to unpack right away, no pun intended, my biggest concern is that Aelita sleeps in a big t-shirt with the letter A on it. Like, does she think it's Aelita and the Chipmunks? Jeremy takes the credit for this mysterious necklace, cause today is Valentine's Day, but Jeremy's also so paranoid, he asks the other guys if they sent the necklace and are making a move on his homegirl. Ulrich says he didn't even know today was Valentine's Day, which is obviously a lie because he's writing a poem for Yumi, but when the bad boy William intervenes and talks to her, Ulrich tries to make her jealous by reading this poem to Sissy, which obviously doesn't rhyme anymore when he replaces Yumi's name.
With you, I never feel gloomy. My little sissy.
Oh, Ulrich, it rhymes. It's so beautiful.
Jeremy then asks if it was Odd, and he's like, dude, that's my cousin. And then he messes with Jeremy, saying, you know, she's not your property, and refuses to ever answer the question. We see the necklace sent by the Xana delivery man is in fact evil, and now possesses Aelita, who convinces Jeremy to bring her back to Lyoko, because she thinks she's found the solution to defeat Xana. Yumi accompanies Aelita since the boys are all in a bad mood, but gets immediately leg swept in this crazy slow-mo combo.
This dude did a 10-hit combo. This dude's doing strings. Wow.
The Lyoko parts of this episode focus a lot on their vehicles as Yumi chases down Aelita, who creates a hole in the ground leading to the digital sea, which, as we know, will scramble Yumi's data, potentially killing her if she falls in. Fortunately, Ulrich is here to save Yumi just before she falls, and you know, he really has a knack for picking the worst times and place. Cause it's here where Ulrich asks Yumi how she liked his poem earlier, revealing it was actually for her. Like, hey, did you like my poem? If you say no and get dropped, you'll die. This ends with Aelita getting grabbed by the Schizozoa yet again, and the group speculates XANA must clearly want Aelita alive for some reason, so they begin shooting Aelita and draining her life points, calling XANA's bluff. Like, hey, if you keep doing this, she'll die, and none of us want that. Aelita's freed with only 10 life points left, learning not to accept presents from strangers, cause they might just possess you and send you to a digital world where your memories will get drained. I guess we never really learn why Odd was messing with Jeremy here. Like, I can kinda understand why it would be annoying if someone randomly came up to you and said, hey, you better not be talking to my girl. Like, you'd maybe want to mess with them too. But they could also imply Odd kinda likes Aelita here. There's a lot of fun love triangles in this episode, and they do a good job of adding drama to the real life aspects of the episode, and overall, it's just another great episode. Episode 33 centers around a school dance Aelita DJs, which seems weird to me, like, just cause she's a digital program, being able to drop some hot fire is a different thing, but it's so fun, I have no problem with it. Really, the only problem I have with this episode is very little happens. Like, they have a subplot about certain characters failing the big exam, like Odd and Sissy, but it doesn't really affect too much. There's not a whole lot to talk about here besides Jim being possessed by XANA and bringing Aelita to Lyoko, where the Schizozoa tries to take her memories yet again. One of the only things that kinda annoys me about Aelita is her desire to fight back feels so random, like she rarely ever uses her earthbending powers, she usually just cowers and waits. Another interesting thing we see here is Ulrich rides up on his big unicycle, which gets to virtualize itself, and after seeing a Happy Meal toy of it, I can't help but think it always just looks like he's riding on a big plastic Happy Meal toy. A one-wheeled motorcycle does sound badass in concept, though. The episode ends with Aelita being saved by Ulrich, deactivating the tower, and everyone returning to the past, where Odd learns he should probably study instead of making an origami swan out of his tests. It's really funny to see Jim loves these origami swans and wishes Mrs. Hertz would let him keep them, like he really appreciates Odd's artistry. Episode 34 starts with the group waiting on Yumi to go to Lyoko, which Ulrich presumes is because she was hanging out with William. As we saw with Jeremy, no one in the show could ever just say yes or no though, so the tension lingers throughout. The Schizozoa goes after Yumi today, cause you know, Yumi hadn't been specifically targeted by XANA for a few episodes, though I suppose the XANA possessed Jim did punch her into a wall last episode. Yumi can't get materialized back into the real world because of this, and more importantly, today is school picture day, and anyone not present will be suspended. Ulrich convinces Sissy to dress like Yumi for the pictures, and you know, they do look pretty similar. I'm more impressed how Sissy's able to style a wig to look just like Yumi, but obviously Yumi doesn't wear dresses or anything not black. In one of her many acts of selflessness, Aelita volunteers to transfer her DNA to Yumi, insisting Yumi's place is on Earth. And even though we've seen this sacrifice before, it still hits hard since we know everything they've done in the show so far is all for the sake of Aelita. They eventually learn this transfer would wipe Yumi's memory and are able to stop it, and I really like how grateful Yumi is still, despite the danger this put her in.
You're turning into a real human being. You're beginning to confuse generosity with stupidity.
There's a lot of ways we see the progression of these characters, like Aelita doing more human things like DJing, or Sissy actually being helpful to Ulrich and Yumi here. The Lyoko crew has to go back to Sector 5, because this is where XANA's memories are stored, so we get a pretty fun Lyoko sequence where they dodge falling pillars from the ceiling, and Yumi's DNA is reprogrammed just before she gets lasered and would have died.
I will fucking laser you with alien fucking eyes and explode your fucking fucking head.
We learned the reason Yumi's late was because she was getting 2 tickets to the Subsonics for her and Ulrich, but when they meet back up with Sissy, who reveals she got in trouble with her father for covering for Yumi, they decide the right thing to do is to give Sissy the ticket to go to the concert with Ulrich. You could kinda argue it's weird to let Sissy go with Ulrich instead of Yumi, like she bought the tickets, but then again, Sissy would much rather go with Ulrich, and she did do a pretty big solid for Yumi. In episode 35, Yumi's father loses his job, and their family's debating moving back to Japan so he can find work. Ulrich's naturally pretty panicked about this, and while Odd jokingly suggests Ulrich marries her so she can have a green card to stay, Ulrich decides it's better to write to a local congressman, nay, the president. You know, I think Odd's idea was more reasonable. When Ulrich writes his letter, it flashes to a shot of Yumi I just had to show because it looks so goofy and less fitting on Yumi than anyone else. Ulrich's radio begins playing the lottery numbers, which we see him write down, and then say that it wouldn't be right to do. It never really occurred to me these characters going back in time means they could do crazy things like win the lottery, but these kids also have such a strong sense of nobility. For whatever reason, the lottery numbers here are Avogadro's constant, so my high school physics teacher would be very proud to see I recognize this random string of numbers. Though I guess it's not technically the same number, it's close enough, and you know, physics wasn't exactly my forte, so maybe it's actually a bad thing I thought this was the number. And I guess they couldn't make the lottery number y equals ax plus b or whatever, so this was the next best thing. We see the light wash over the school that makes everyone return to the past, but Jeremy says he's patched this and it shouldn't be happening anymore. We can obviously assume this was Ulrich since he goes to buy a lottery ticket, which he gives to Yumi's parents and tells them not to tell Yumi he did this. When the Lyoko crew learns this was Ulrich's doing, they're really mad at him for betraying their trust and making XANA stronger. But you know what else makes XANA stronger? Not having Yumi, his favorite target, around anymore. I really enjoy how we just vaguely understand that XANA gets stronger from going back to the past. It makes a lot of the victories feel more bittersweet, but it also makes me uneasy, like there's no way to gauge how strong XANA's truly become. Nicholas, aka the guy that basically walks around in his boxers, gets possessed by XANA and begins messing with the lab. Nothing's really unique to Nicholas specifically being possessed, and I'd say that's my only real issue with these possessions is that it's a bit random and uninvolved with the story. Ulrich comes in and saves the day, allowing him to rejoin the crew, and they donate the lottery winnings to a charity that builds wells in Africa. I really like this episode, and I appreciate the moral and romantic dilemmas of Ulrich messing with the lottery. One could argue the rest of the group's a little harsh on Ulrich, or a little too lax about potentially losing Yumi, but I think they do a great job showing that Yumi leaving is only a possibility, and Ulrich may be overreacting because he's a kid in love. It might sound a little goofy to say, but there's times where Code Lyoko just feels subtle and nuanced in all the right ways. Episode 36 has one of my favorite things, villains and heroes teaming up for the greater good. Jeremy gets an idea for an antivirus that'll take out XANA's monsters he calls Marabunta, or Army Ant, based off an ant colony they studied in science that day. But when the program is brought to Lyoko, it not only takes out XANA's monsters, but goes after Aelita too. As we've seen so far this season, XANA doesn't want to kill Aelita, it wants her memories for whatever reason. So we get this crazy team up between the Lyoko warriors and all of XANA's monsters, like we see the crab sacrifice itself to launch Aelita to safety before being destroyed by the antivirus. Seeing this squad side by side is really badass, but also just looks really funny to me. In the real world segments of this episode, William saves Ulrich after he flops off the diving board trying to impress Yumi, and then Jim rushes in and gives him CPR, leading to the events of the day never to be discussed ever again, with the others left only to imagine what could have possibly happened between them at the pool. There's some really great scenes and tension throughout the episode, like William and Sissy talking about their unrequited love for Yumi and Ulrich, or William and Ulrich having a confrontation about his hostility, and how Ulrich must hate William because he realizes he needs to confront his own feelings for Yumi and actually do something. It's nice to see someone finally gets in here and says, please make a move, because this is really one of my only complaints about Code Lyoko, how much they tease potential relationships and just deliberately go back on any progress they ever make. I understand they don't want to alienate viewers by having plot lines too strong you wouldn't be able to follow it if you missed a few episodes or caught some reruns, but I don't think certain plot lines progressing would be detrimental to the show's continuity or accessibility, especially when the very first episode is a giant Godzilla teddy bear we're just supposed to accept like this is normal without any context. Episode 37 continues the trend of XANA and the Lyoko crew working together for the sake of Aelita, which is badass. Cause what XANA does here is possess this criminal to steal uranium to help power the supercomputer, which we discover is running out of fuel. It's such a crazy concept, but is so cool, I love it. Also, a few comments point out, the password this possessed criminal uses to break into the armored truck is literally 123456. Like, this show has so many patterns in it, I think I'm becoming a conspiracy theorist. We got y equals ax plus b on every chalkboard, Avogadro's constant is the lottery number. If the creators put a safe in front of me and made a password to it, I bet I could hack it in like under 5 minutes. A lot of people really admire how dark the show can get at times, like Aelita's in the hospital and her heart keeps stopping because of the failure of the supercomputer, and it's pretty grim and graphic to see them constantly having to pump her chest as she's dying. The possessed XANA criminal kidnaps Jeremy to make him fix the computer, and Jeremy calls the group and is like, hey, good news, bad news. I'm being forced to put uranium in the computer, but the second I fix it, he's gonna kill me. And Jeremy does actually say he's gonna kill him, not unalive or krill or anything. The episode ends with Aelita actually using her powers to open the floor under XANA's creatures, and then she stumbles into the tower at the fastest rate she's ever gone. I don't know if there's a reason Aelita doesn't use her powers more often, like if it hurts her to use or anything, but it's probably one of the most overpowered attacks in the whole show. I kinda like the team up last episode of the Lyoko Warriors and the XANA creatures a bit more, but this episode has some really cool moments and drama. In episode 38, we see Jeremy insist more and more to return to the past, even if XANA hasn't done anything, which as we know is bad because it makes XANA stronger. This episode focuses a lot on Jeremy and his increasing tension as of late, and the visuals inside his mind are really fascinating. Like, if you told someone this was from Full Metal Alchemist, they might believe you. We learn Jeremy's been deliberately using the return to the past to increase his intelligence, and he learned this info from what he gathered from Franz Hopper and Sector 5. I think it's so cool and so deep to see that Jeremy's sacrificing his mental and physical health to boost his intelligence to save Aelita, and we see Jeremy descend further into madness. While Jeremy struggles to ensure he doesn't lose Aelita, we actually see she's more concerned of losing him. And man, this episode could be like a standalone movie. This is beautiful. The remainder of the episode has Yumi and Jeremy stuck in an automatically driving ambulance headed into the river while Ulrich, Odd, and Aelita fighting Lyoko. I really appreciate how much more they all interact with the environment this season, like with them seesawing on this block of ice. It makes everything feel much more realistic and alive. We end the episode with Jeremy giving Ulrich the instructions to return to the past just before the water drowns him. Even though we just saw Ulrich knows how to do this from winning the lottery, but whatever. So the episode ends with them going back to the past and discussing whether Jeremy learning to go back to the past to become smarter was some kind of trap by XANA, and who exactly is Franz Hopper. So let's move on and see what we can learn about these mysteries. Episode 39 has everyone learning how to drive, and I don't know, for some reason I assumed the kids who could ride hovercrafts between trees, dodging lasers from digital monsters, would be decent at driving cars, but they all suck, except William. William kinda looks like the 17-year-old that drives his car to middle school though, I don't know. XANA's monsters take over the real world here, and we see Ulrich and William team up to fight them, hinting at the first signs of William's further involvement with the group. I think a more edgy, bad boy type of character complements this overall more chill and subdued cast pretty well. The rest of the episode's just fighting the monsters in and out of Lyoko, which is cool, but not really my cup of tea. In the end, we have William and Odd team up to tie a crab to the driver's ed car and swing it into the open shaft of the factory, and despite William forgetting everything, him and Ulrich actually become friends here since Ulrich can drive a car pretty well now, with William even inviting Ulrich to his go-kart club, birthing a new friendship/rivalry. Episode 40 is a zombie survival episode and has some really fun character moments, like the news reporter gal see Kiwi just standing in the hallway and decide to go put Odd's dog back in his room. It's so funny everyone in this school except the teachers know Odd has a dog and cover for him. It turns out Kiwi gets possessed by XANA here, and I don't know who would have guessed Kiwi's possession would turn into a zombie episode. When the zombie outbreak happens, William steps up as the leader of everyone, ensuring no one gets in or out, and going as far as pushing Jeremy over, like he will beat them up before he lets them die, which is some tough love, I suppose. suppose. By the end of the episode, just about everyone gets turned into zombies, even Jeremy, who's barely able to help them return to the past with his last ounce of free will. Despite the episode starting with Sissy making fun of the news reporter girls as usual, we actually see her protecting them during the zombie outbreak, showing us yet another time in the series where Sissy rises to the occasion and helps protect others. Sissy may really be the most complex character in the whole show. I think it's natural to see some people really admire her, and some people have pointed out the Lyoko crew may actually be nice to her despite her snobby attitude, because there's so many situations like this where Sissy helps everyone, even though these heroics never truly materialize in the canon timeline since they always return to the past. As this comment points out, there's really something so fascinating about giving and taking away character development to someone over and over again, but others understandably aren't too impressed by Sissy rising to the occasion when stakes get dire, feeling that's a little more of a natural response. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Sissy, cause while she's one of my favorite characters, I can understand people loving or hating her. Episode 41 has Sissy's father, the principal, get possessed by XANA, holding Yumi hostage in exchange for Aelita to give her to a Schifozoa. This is one of the rare instances where the gang interacts with XANA directly, but also these poor kids, they should be playing kickball, not dealing with hostage negotiations.
Odd! No, Mr. Dumbass, stop!
I know their last name is Delmas, but it always sounds like dumbass to me. Sissy really goes above and beyond to help Aelita this episode, and when Jeremy won't let Aelita go into Lyoko because it's too dangerous, Sissy punches him out cold, using her Penchak Silat skills. She says she kept studying it to impress Ulrich, but it didn't work out, and I'm glad she still found some use for it, but I would put my money on Sissy in a fight against Jeremy, with or without martial arts training. The episode ends with Ulrich telling Sissy that she won't remember any of this, but he will, so Sissy confides in Ulrich he'll remember this kiss, and it's a sweet sentiment, even though Odd kinda wishes he was blind. I can see why people may ship Ulrich and Sissy, even over Ulrich and Yumi, cause despite their differences, they mesh really well together when situations go wrong, and they're so much more romantic than Ulrich and Yumi, probably on account of Sissy not being able to remember any of these events that would probably affect the overall plot otherwise. Episode 42 has one of the funniest concepts in the whole show so far. Yumi and Odd have a Freaky Friday body swap when they get rematerialized, leading to Odd making all sorts of poignant discoveries, like the itch on his back being because of his bra. Well, her bra. You know, it's kinda funny they keep the voices despite being in different bodies. I assume to all the other characters, Odd sounds like Yumi when he's in her body.
Come on! Ask me out! I'm waiting!
I've seen several people say Odd is a bisexual king, mainly because of how he dresses, and while I usually just say, no Patrick, he's just European, Odd making Sissy mad by cuddling Ulrich here is so funny. Like, Odd's the GOAT. Yumi gets the short end of the stick all throughout the episode, having two girls Odd's dating simultaneously find out and get mad at her, and we see Odd struggle to use chopsticks, breaking out the secret weapon Yumi gave him in case of emergency, a fork. Nah, eating sushi with a fork is crazy, like using your hands would be more appropriate. And to make matters worse, the next day Odd comes to school dressed like a cat girl. And yeah, I guess that is Odd's aesthetic. I mean, he's a cat boy in Lyoko, but also the implication this is an outfit Yumi owns but never wears is really funny. The news of Yumi and Ulrich being a couple is spread throughout the school from Odd teasing Sissy earlier, and believing Yumi's in love helps justify all Odd's crazy actions throughout the episode, like speaking Chinese to Yumi's Japanese family at home. In Lyoko, we see Odd struggles to run in heels, and they both struggle to use each other's weapons, but end up mastering them in order to save Aelita from the Schifozoa. So all is well that ends well, except when Yumi finds the school paper, it shows the photos of Ulrich and Yumi now as a couple cuddling. Episode 43 starts with Jeremy just walking up to this girl Heidi and kissing her, causing everyone to be mad at him, cause not only was Odd about to go on a date with her, but like, yeah, that's illegal, man. Obviously, this is XANA's doing, and it's like, really XANA, you can try to drown these kids in the river in an ambulance, but making them just kiss random people, that's just weird, man. This also happens to Yumi, who kisses this guy, and Ulrich, who kisses Sissy, and none of them are even aware they did this. We learn soon enough XANA made a clone that's going around the school pretending to be them and kissing people, not mind controlling the cast, and I don't know if that makes this better or worse. Like, XANA could be using these resources to make a bomb, but uses it to kiss students instead. XANA, I thought you were a program, not a PDF file. I will say, XANA.pdf actually tricked me pretty good, because in the next scene following Jeremy's discovery XANA made a clone, we see him run into the Hermitage where Aelita's crying because Jeremy yelled at her for kissing Nicholas, and they forgive each other and kiss. Then we find out XANA's still impersonating Jeremy when the gang confronts XANA, and then he turns into Jim and starts fighting. Which reminds me, earlier in the episode, XANA just walks up to Jim as the nurse Yolanda and kisses him. This didn't help XANA's plans at all. He just did this for the love of the game. The second half of the episode's just fighting in Lyoko and is a bit boring, especially considering the vast majority of the tension and mystery's already been solved. But we end the episode with the real Aelita kissing the real Jeremy, freezing him in place and proving to her that it wasn't actually Jeremy that kissed her earlier. Overall, it's a fine episode. The plot and mystery was intriguing enough at first, but it's a little weird, and the combat was pretty boring for me without much plot left behind it. In episode 44, the antivirus for Aelita seems to finally be done, but there seems to be some kind of glitch that causes Aelita to turn invisible here. Meanwhile, Odd, Yumi, and Ulrich are surrounded by wolves possessed by XANA, so Aelita has to go to Lyoko by herself, which, as we know, is really dangerous, but they don't have much of a choice. The majority of this episode's just fighting in Lyoko and Ulrich against these wolves, and we learn Ulrich has vertigo when he tries to rock climb and fails miserably against William. But in the end of the episode, when they return to the past, Ulrich says to William, "Yeah, I got vertigo, but at least I'm not afraid of spiders, Spider-Man." And this is like the third or fourth time this season someone's been called Spider-Man, which is always weird to hear in shows. They use a lot more brand names this season, and every time it's a bit jarring to me. I don't know, French copyright would be a little more lax than in the US, but in the end, Odd asks Aelita if being invisible is like being Sue from the Fantastic Four, and yeah, not a whole lot to say about this episode overall. The season's kind of falling into a disaster of the week format, whereas in this episode, XANA causes a winter snowstorm that nearly freezes the entire school and everyone in it. We get the same scenario of Aelita saying she needs to go to Lyoko by herself or everyone will die, and Jeremy says, "Yeah, but XANA will take your memories if you do," and then they eventually just go in. Both sides make sense here, but I just feel like they have this exact same conversation every episode this season. The snowstorm feels like a very classic XANA scheme, like one you'd see from season 1, like when the school was attacked by rats or gravity turning off. And I do really like the school scenes in this episode. They're pretty dramatic, like a tree falling on Yumi and Ulrich stays by her side as they both freeze. He tells her not only do they need her to fight XANA, but he needs her. It's pretty heartwarming, and we return to the past just before she freezes to death. The Lyoko part isn't terribly interesting, and I think maybe I'm burning out on the Lyoko segments, but we'll see they pick back up. There's also a famous TV reporter at the school during the blizzard, but he had such little impact on the plot, it's not even worth mentioning. Like, I guess you could say his car crash in the snow kinda caused the tree to fall on Yumi, but he just doesn't do much except complain here, so I don't have much to say. Moving on. Episode 46 is very psychological, kinda along the lines of Serial Experiment Lane, with hallucinations and the blending of reality and technology. It is cool to note that Lane was one of Killed Lyoko's biggest inspirations, and Aelita's suffering from these hallucinations, being chased by men in suits, and returns to the Hermitage where Franz Hopper, or a vision of him, helps her escape. The gang speculates this must be XANA's doing since Franz and Aelita share a connection to XANA. Aelita escapes into the transporter to Sector 5 by herself and is once again attacked by the Schizozoa, who drains her memories. This is a pretty fun Sector 5 scene with everyone jumping through moving pillars, kinda like Frogger, and Odd lines up a snipe across the map because he's an epic gamer. The biggest mystery of this episode's whether Aelita is truly onto something or if it's XANA's trap, and there's so much tension throughout, like Aelita refusing to deactivate the tower because she wants the answers and information this badly. Like Jeremy's even telling Ulrich and Yumi to drag her back by force if they have to. So the tower gets deactivated without the proper answers to her questions, but I love the tension of this episode. And for someone as caring and timid as Aelita to put this strain on everyone, you really feel how much this all must mean to her. But we'll have to save this mysteries for a future episode, because this one ends with Odd meeting up with a mystery date from an online app. You can really tell this episode came out at a time before these were a common thing, because obviously there's a big threat of being kidnapped or something, or much worse, the mystery date is Sissy. Honestly, Odd and Sissy are a good couple. The snobby girl and the goofy guy is always a fun couple. Episode 47 has the nurse Yolanda getting taken over by XANA and brings Aelita to Lyoko. It's a little disappointing to go back to the who's getting possessed today format, but as always, they managed to keep it fresh by having Jeremy implement his newest discovery, possessing the Lyoko warriors himself and making them super strong, into the episode. I feel like Jeremy's so underrated because for being the nerd on the computer, he has a lot of really funny lines, often just from how blunt he is.
If this ends badly, Jeremy, you promise to look after Kiwi?
If this ends badly, there'll be nobody left to look after Kiwi.
The Lyoko segments of the episode are fine, but I have very little to say about the episode overall. Yolanda being possessed doesn't really factor into anything. Like, the start of the episode had her taking everyone's health metrics, and we see Odd's a little underweight and Sissy's a little overweight, but these don't really play into the episode at all. It's just kind of an opening and closing gag. Odd doesn't decide to volunteer to turn into the powerful virus form because of his insecurity or anything really. It's just kind of there. Also, I feel like teenage girls especially have enough body issues or eating disorders, so I kind of cringed a little when they called Sissy overweight, especially when she's as tall and skinny as every other gal in the show. You know, every guy in this show really is a short king. Really, Sissy needs to stop worrying about her weight and focus on her free throws, cause the Lakers need a center. Episode 48 has Sissy inviting Ulrich to the boiler room where she set up a seance for a spirit she believes is haunting the school. This is such a funny visual. Like, when Sissy says meet me after class, you think she's setting up candles for a date, not a pentagram. When we see one of XANA's specters show up, they all go to Lyoko to stop it, and this episode's just pretty bland from a plot perspective, but there are a lot of funny little subtle moments. Like when XANA's monster first appears, Ulrich isn't even phased. He's just standing there motionless. Pretty badass.
Do you believe in ghosts?
No.
Wrong answer.
The episode looks pretty cool, and honestly the music here is really good and is heard very rarely in other episodes. It just all flows really well. Also, for whatever reason, this comment cracks me up. Yumi and Aelita winning the IDGAF war on that Sector 5 platform. Like, yeah, they could die here, but who cares? They really got Stormtrooper aim. Not a whole lot to say, but we're nearing the big finale of the season, so stay tuned and let's keep moving. Episode 49 starts with XANA activating a tower, and when they get to the lab, the Franz Hopper, the man this season revolves around, is just chilling in the lab deactivating the tower. It doesn't even need to go to Lyoko to fix it. I know this cast is a little bit stoic, but it's so crazy he just shows up to the lab and they're not freaked out. Like, everything they fought for and sacrificed would be well within their grasp if this was the case. Jeremy thinks it's cool Aelita's genius father figure's here, and even though he adores his own father, says he's not a genius. Though I do question how much Jeremy adores his dad, because when he calls Jeremy in the next scene, he thinks it's Franz for whatever reason.
Jeremy? It's me.
Fritz?
No, Michael, your father.
Like, you're telling me he doesn't recognize his father's voice? Today's Jeremy's birthday, as we see the fellas break into the room, giving him a drawing Odd drew from memory of the whole crew. Whenever characters draw other characters in shows, I always wonder if it looks exactly like them according to the show. Like, is Odd just a casual Picasso here, or what? Later they go back to the lab, where Franz says the virtualization process is dangerous and was unfinished, and while Ulrich and Odd are fine, Yumi, of course, has some kind of cell degeneration issue. This causes a lot of tension that feels a bit unfair towards Jeremy, but it's understandable given the critical nature of the situation. Like, everyone's mad at Jeremy for endangering Yumi and not knowing what's gonna happen to her, blaming him for being the brains of it all. And I'm kinda like, okay, well, you be the brains of it all then. A few episodes ago, Aelita nearly wiped Yumi's memory clean trying to bring her back to the real world, and Yumi said, nah, it's all good, it's the thought that counts. counts. But I understand why they'd act rude here, given the panic of Yumi's life being at stake. What's even crazier is that Franz seems to have found a solution to make Aelita a human permanently, and they'll have to go to Sector 5 to get it, and everyone's like, sure, why not? This dangerous portal we hate Jeremy now for using, let's just go do it. So Jeremy leaves, calling his father because he wants to transfer to the school for gifted children, but has an epiphany that this Franz Hopper is probably XANA, on account of knowing these random things about them all, like Jeremy got possessed by XANA previously and destroyed Franz's diary. So Jeremy sneaks back to the lab, creating a decoy of Aelita before she was virtualized, and defeats XANA here. Jeremy tells his dad to go home, and he's pretty chill with driving here to take Jeremy to the gifted school and just leaving empty-handed, but it's a sweet scene. We really saw Jeremy's dad before Jeremy and Lyoko. Overall, it's a sweet episode. I could see people not liking it because of how the characters interact here, but it feels very realistic given the panic of Yumi's life being in danger, so I like it. Let's move on. Episode 50 starts with Odd presenting a short film he made about a monster as big as her ego, which we learn is Sissy, unknowingly being made fun of in her starring role. The film is diabolical, just roasting Jim and Sissy, but XANA interrupts, possessing Sissy, and she starts speaking in tongues or code. We learn what she's saying is, I can help you, and they bring her back to the lab, where we learn that it actually isn't XANA possessing Sissy, but Franz Hopper, who wants to get into contact with the group. And like, at this point, if I were one of the Lyoko warriors, I'd be like, you're Franz Hopper, he's Franz Hopper, are there any other Franz Hoppers I should know about? So it's cool to see that we're actually getting in contact with Franz, but having the episode where he was already here in the lab just kind of killed a lot of the excitement for me. Like, they kind of went ahead and spoiled the big reveal, but they clearly don't think it's that big of a deal either. But let's see how this plays out as we're nearing the conclusion of season 2. Oh yeah, XANA took over a nurse and Odd knocked her out with a defibrillator, which is crazy, as these comments point out. We don't even see them go back to the past, so hopefully she's okay, and the hospital is okay with them just stealing a patient. Episode 51 has Jeremy activating a tower in order to decrypt Franz Hopper's journal, cause that'll help somehow. I don't know, we're like 25 episodes in. If you need to activate a tower to do this, Jeremy, go right ahead. XANA makes a clone of Odd after he went to the middle of the woods to meet up with his mystery date, so I assume it was XANA messaging Odd this whole time, and again, XANA really creepy. So the threat here is that XANA will take over the restricted part of the supercomputer, which would not only take over all of Franz Hopper's data, but all of Jeremy's work, if not Aelita as well. The tower isn't deactivated by Aelita here, but by the real Franz Hopper who's activating the decoding program. We don't see him, but his presence is definitely felt as his diary is finally decoded. We learn he's the creator of XANA, and from this diary, we also get one of the biggest reveals in the whole show. Before virtualizing himself in Lyoko, where he was captured by XANA, Franz Hopper was on Earth, and he had a daughter who was also virtualized, which could only be Aelita. I think the reveal Aelita is Franz Hopper's daughter actually isn't the big twist, since it's kind of already implied. Rather, Aelita being an actual human just with memory loss makes so many scenes hit so much harder. Aelita's sacrifices she was willing to make for the others feel so different, knowing Aelita isn't a machine who doesn't fully process the weight of her sacrifice. She's just a really nice girl who's very selfless. So we go into the finale of season 2 with the mysteries of Aelita and Franz Hopper nearing huge breakthroughs. But before we get into the final episode, I just wanted to give a quick thanks to Buggy, Luca17, Paul H, Luther, Flynn Lee, Jack C, and Richard M. Thanks so much for your support. It really means a lot to me, and let's get into the season finale. The final episode of season 2 hits the ground running as we learn from Fran's diary that XANA was built to help destroy this military program. Through this research, we learn Franz has been using the Return to the Past feature he discovered thousands of times, which is probably why XANA's so strong in the first place. Keep in mind, Ulrich was basically put on indefinite leave for using it once to win millions of dollars to help the group. Franz Hopper used it for like 7 years. From this diary, Jeremy also learns Aelita doesn't actually have a virus she needs to fix, but there's actually some mysterious component she's missing, stolen and stored away in Sector 5. Aelita, however, never wants to go back to Lyoko, heartbroken her father's some kind of mad scientist who essentially stole her life away. And on top of this, tonight's the night of the school dance. As usual, Ulrich and Yumi are like some combination of blind, deaf, or stupid, because Yumi says she wants to talk to Ulrich about the dance, and then William pulls her away because he wants to ask her to the dance, and then Ulrich assumes she must already be going with him, so decides to go with Sissy instead. For better or worse, neither end up going because they have to go to Sector 5 to save Aelita because she damn near killed herself trying to shut down the supercomputer in order to protect everyone else. That's like really dark. I know Aelita's tried to sacrifice herself before, but this time feels a little more like she's having a crisis and trying to end it all. In Lyoko, they have 3 minutes to press this button to save Aelita, and we even have these manta rays help Ulrich and Aelita, which aren't enemies, but help sent from Franz Hopper. Seeing the manta rays up close here and all peaceful is actually really pretty. We never see them not shrieking and shooting lasers, but they have this really nice glow to them. It's nice to see. They find Aelita's missing core memories, which is actually a trap by XANA, and everyone gets knocked out of Lyoko except Aelita, trapped alone with the Schifozoa. And you know, after narrowly dodging the Schifozoa for an entire season, having it actually take Aelita's memories here is a great twist. Like, I thought Franz Hopper was gonna step in, but they really have Aelita's memories taken away, the big bad thing they tried to dodge.
Aelita's...
Yeah, these kids are traumatized forever. I just feel bad for them, man. We see flashbacks of Aelita's childhood, like Aelita's mother before she mysteriously vanishes, and we learn the hallucinations Aelita's had of being chased by these men in black and escaping down to the lab is actually something that happened in her life, and that the reason why she and Franz escaped to Lyoko was in large part because of these men, who presumably would have killed or at least arrested them for these military experiments. Returning back to the present, we see the towers in Lyoko are deactivated by Franz, saving Aelita and her memories, even at the cost of freeing XANA from the digital world. So Aelita's memories of her time on Earth are restored, we know she's human, and she seems to be free from Lyoko for good. On the other hand, turning off the supercomputer won't stop XANA now, and XANA's even stronger than before. This feels like a pretty satisfying trade-off though, like both sides ended the season stronger, and we've made a lot of headway in the mysteries of Aelita, Franz Hopper, and XANA. The season ends on a really sweet note, with Jeremy saying they'll continue to find a way to defeat XANA, and it's not Aelita's job alone, but all of theirs. It's really one of the best episodes in the whole series, and totally worth a watch. But there's one more episode I'm gonna cover today, a 2-part prequel known as Episode 0, XANA Awakens. So you may remember the show just throws us in right away with no context in episode 1, fighting a giant teddy bear Godzilla, and the writers had a very deliberate mindset that the audience will be a bit lost, but understand things eventually. I think it makes sense, given the intention that a viewer can jump in on any episode and not be too lost because of missing context, but this prequel actually explains everything, from how the warriors all meet to how they found the lab. And seeing this after the events of season 2 is so cool, like it actually makes me appreciate the events of the season much more, but it also would have been really nice to see before the first episode. There were some moments in season 2, like the episode where Jeremy gets blamed for nearly killing Yumi, where a lot of that blame is on Jeremy for being the brains behind the virtualization in the first place, but that blame just felt a little out of place when they're talking about events we've never seen before. I think the biggest takeaway from this prequel is what we learn about Sissy and her initial relation with the rest of the group, because we see she helps the crew and it's actually Yumi that's an outsider to their plans. Also, we see Odd's a new student, and he wears his hair slicked down, which looks really bad and funny. He's still got that purple diamond though. It's not until he first gets virtualized that he decides to wear his hair spiked up, which is really funny. Also, the first time he sees Sissy, he does say he finds her attractive, so I'd say maybe Odd's deeper than we think, since he finds her repulsive on a normal basis. But then again, Odd's basically dated every girl in the entire grade, so yeah. Anyways, I love that Sissy's totally willing to help the Lyoko crew, as long as it doesn't interfere with cheerleading practice. She's such a fun addition to the gang. XANA starts attacking everyone with this giant electric orb that just follows everyone around and electrocutes Sissy. When she comes to her senses later in the episode, she brings Jim and the principal down to the factory, despite promising not to tell anyone about the operation. I really feel for Sissy here, cause like despite how cruel she can be, she had nothing but good intentions trying to save her friends here, but this is a huge reason why Sissy isn't part of the crew. While I think she'd make a great addition to the cast, it's clear where her priorities lie. I can't even blame her for trying to save the rest of the crew, thinking their lives are at stake, but as we've seen in the events of this show, these kids are willing to put their lives, as well as the rest of the world, at risk in order to save this pink-haired VTuber. So Aelita deactivates the tower, and we see the first return of the past, though Jeremy doesn't seem to remember it. So this is how the origins of Code Lyoko went down. It's so cool to finally see them write these origin events, cause the creators started at the middle of the show without yet knowing how it all began, which sounds really funny, but I think it's pretty ingenious. That's about it for this video. If you enjoyed it, liking and subscribing helps me a ton, and I'll talk to you next week, where we'll go over the second season of another classic show from this era, Mucha Lucha. Alright, I'll talk to you next week. Bye.